speaking of what we've just watched, Chewie, she was asked by the podcasters, how is it being sort of an observer in Trump's America, looking at the military on the street? And this is what she had to say.
Incredible. But I do want to ask you one question just to start. Like, you're here in Los Angeles on this tour, like a few miles from here.
Yeah.
The U.S. Marines are deployed. The National Guard is deployed. What is it like as you've been living in the United States for a brief time now, but as someone who's not American, can you share a perspective of like what this looks like kind of from the outside in to see the U.S. military in the streets like this?
It's not good.
Yeah, going on 2 years now, and I'm always really aware that I'm an observer, and that's a really privileged position to have, and always have a little bit of caution, commentating on other people's democracy as an observer. But it really does feel like the United States is the epicenter of a globalization of political culture.
Culture wars.
So you are not the only ones who are having this experience of the perfect storm of the disruption to what healthy democracies need, but you are having the experience first in the most extreme ways. When you think from the trajectory of January 6th, then of course through the Trump re-election and the manifestation of his particular style of politics and leadership, to now what we're seeing manifesting in the streets, added with mis and disinformation on top of that. It's a pattern that we are seeing in other places, but you are seeing it first, and you're seeing it in a very extreme way.
So they are the melting pot. America is the melting pot for culture wars, and for not necessarily for producing, which we'll get onto shortly, mis and disinformation, but certainly an incubator for it, Chewie, if we can say that. Then it infects the world often, say from Russia to America to the world, seems to be what's happening. It was just very strange. I didn't hear any buzzwords or kind of middle management enthusiastic slogans in there. I'm not quite sure how to take it, Chewie, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, it's it's strange. She's also in a position she just can't jump out and say it's wrong to militarize, to point your army at your citizenry is not a good sign that things are going well.
ICE might turn up on her doorstep and deport her if she does that, bro. Probably be a bit careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look, commentators on that are learning that in real time. There was an Australian journalist in the last couple of days that was deported and was only given her phone back to her when she arrived in Melbourne. She spent 18 hours getting there, 48 hours in detention, and 18 hours coming back, and that was because of an article that she wrote. So I mean, this is the thing, is this is what's happening to foreign journalists.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of questions lately, certainly after that Australian journalist copped a rubber bullet that we had on the show the other day, that, hey, you've got the World Cup and Olympics coming up.
Oh, yeah, sheesh.
Maybe this is something that needs to be considered about whether it is safe to go to the US in this environment.
Yeah, gosh, because there'll be lots of brown athletes, bro. They won't get past. Yep. All of a sudden, you'll be like, why does everyone feel so white at the Olympics? It's not. Remember that quote we tried to get for Luxon? It's not all white. It's not all white, Mr. Luxon. It's not all white, Trump. I know you want it to be, but it's not.
I saw a lot of comments, especially in circles that were talking about the No Kings protest and people going to the No Kings. There wasn't a lot of people that were talking about this, but I did notice that there were a few of like, if this is your first time protesting, here are some things you need to consider.
Yeah.
Write your lawyer's phone number or your next of kin's phone number on your body. Do not take your phone or have it in flight mode. Don't take your photos. Don't take photos of other people going with it. Don't say on social media that you're going protesting. Carry a mask. Cover your face. Our country is sliding into fascism, or deeper into fascism, and we don't know where things are going to go. And I think I read that and I went, oh, that's pretty chilling that they're at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's get to the next part. The next part actually is There's lots of parts, but the next part we're going to play tonight kind of was reflecting back on COVID in New Zealand. And there was a couple of things mentioned in this conversation that I was like, oh, gosh, had known that. And Chewie, we talked about this in the weekend. This is talking about the value that citizens, the value that gets put on life. And people have already mentioned in the chat what Brooke Van Velden has said about this, which we're going to talk a bit about as well. So this is the talking a bit about the value of life. And this is what makes me kind of go, mate, she was so good. She says a point here where they had to put a value on suicides, right? They had to actually kind of go, let's have a target. And she goes, we knew it was unrealistic, but we wanted to make it 0. Why would you have a tolerance for suicide? And I'm just like, oh my God, just fills your heart just to hear that again. You're like, they know that they're not realistic, but like, why are we going to accept one? We need to sort of mourn and just say not one's okay. So we're going to aim for 0, although we know it's unrealistic. It's so good. It's such good politicking and such good human being-ing.
I want to ask about what you as a leader learned during COVID about the value that citizens put on life. The kind of jumping off point for this question was there was an article in the New Yorker that said the following: an opposition politician named Brooke Van Velden declared at a medical technology conference that Ardern's administration had put far too much emphasis on saving lives. Quote, when it came to COVID, we completely blew out what the value of life was, she said. I've never seen such a high value on life.
Now, we're not stopping, but I just wanted to, because I tweeted it this week, and I've got it right here. I just want to read that to you again. Now, Brooke Van Velden does try and bring some context to it, which we'll get to later, but this is the quote, right? I've got it here. When it came to COVID, we completely blew out what the value of a life was. Completely. I've never seen such a high value on life. Jacinda Ardern's government was about having a high value on life. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, I support that. I support that. And just remember, not that I've got, it's the conservative right that always go off at the left for things like, oh, they would abort a 40-week abortion. They have no value to life, yet the right, a representative of the right is the one going, oh, that's too much value, too much value on life. Now, my contention is it's bullshit. And I've got a few receipts to show you as we go through, but let's get to the end of Jacinda answering this question about the citizens, that the citizens put on life, the value that citizens put on life.
Velden declared at a medical technology conference that Ardern's administration had put far too much emphasis on saving lives. Quote, when it came to COVID, we completely blew out what the value of life was, she said. I've never seen such a high value on life. Van Velden became a minister in the new government, they note in this article. That quote is so crazy on its face. But I wanted to sort of unpack the sentiment a bit and understand like maybe what you learned about what value people put on the lives of others versus their own personal freedom and how that impacted choices you had to make.
Yeah, and this is such an interesting question because in policy making and in government policy, you know, there are some areas where there will be called to put a number or a calculation on human life in that way. And when I think about, for instance, we have a scheme called ACC in New Zealand where, you know, you are compensated for injury or accidents or, you know, in some cases, loss of life. And so there are some areas of government policy that quantify these things. But the idea of doing that, the idea of saying, well, at this particular point, that investment, that trade-off means that, you know, that we'll have this hit to our economy and that cost is too high, that seemed both crude to me, but also wrong. And I think the point that perhaps is being missed in her statement was that she's making a claim that there was a trade-off when actually our view was a strong response to COVID was a strong health response was the best economic response. If we didn't...
Sorry, Joey. I just need to take a bit of a moment and go out with a bang.
Remember?
Good.
Remember, fam? And then
And
Some of our society's most cretinous made her existence so unpleasant that she left the country.
now,
We should
you
never
may
let
not
those people away with it.
you may not remember, but when I was a kid, we had this prime minister called Jacinda Ardern. It's nothing like the prime ministers you have now. All those 2 years
What was
ago.
the COVID response as far as the economy? We should make sure that people don't die,
Yeah.
because the economy is made of people.
Yeah. 60 seconds to go for this clip.
Respond to the fear that people had. People would self-exclude from the economy anyway.
Right.
And so managing and trying to pursue the strategy we did, which was elimination of COVID, we felt did both. A similar experience I remember when we were working on mental health. It was a big focus for us as a government, and we were called upon to come up with a target for suicide reduction.
Oof.
And I remember really grappling with that, the idea that setting a target and somehow putting on display that you had a tolerance for something where we clearly had a role to play as government in the provision of mental health service. And so in the end, even though I knew it was unrealistic, we said our target is 0. Because why say you have a tolerance? And in many ways, I think we took a similar approach with COVID. If lives could be saved, we should be saving them.
Oh, Chewie, I think we need to play parts of this every night. If lives could be saved, we should be saving them. Flip that over into any policy now. You know, if help could be given, we should be given it. If a house is there to be used, we should be letting vulnerable people use it. It's just, fuck me, it's a different world we live in today. And I want to say this again, and I know there's probably no crunchies watching right now, but they might see this clip. You guys chased this person out of the country. This person could still be Prime Minister right now. You guys in your wackadoo stories and Russian misinformation got sucked into a hole of chasing that empathy and that care out of this country and out of her job when we could still have that compassion and care. And the thing is, what she just said is what we just said. The compassion for people and their health needs was also the best response for the economy. It's exactly what we just talked about with Jacinda. If someone comes into work sick because this government has cut the sick days in half and they make the other 4 people in the office sick, it's actually worse for the economy. A good health outcome is actually better for the economy as well. But no, we'll chase her out. We'll sit on their front lawn. We'll call her all the worst names in the world. She'll be potentially, and this has been reported, that she might be the first Prime Minister to need security the rest of her life. And that's the response we could have had to tariffs. Ethical, moral, compassionate, good for the economy. It's so infuriating.
The person that said that the value of life had been blown out, like, she's not putting a number on it, but that one comment just shows, what value do you put on someone's nan? Yeah. What value do you put on your brother or sister? What value do you put on the person that you like? It's just such a cold metric. And that minister, the person that thought that was okay to verbalize to other people in a setting where it was obviously recorded and noted down, is now our workplace minister
For
minister
safety.
for workplace relationship and safety.
The person who thought there was too much value on human life is now responsible for the safety of human lives in the workplace. Think about that for a second. Chewie, I want to just also explain, I want to bring some receipts as well, if you'll let me do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give her dues. This is what Brooke Van Velden said when she got challenged about that comment. high value on human life comment. This is what she said. She said, asked about the comments, she said, I said last year there were a range of different ways you could value life based on which government agency you're talking to. For example, ACC put values on your life. The Transport Authority also has a value on your life. When it came to COVID, the government made active decisions on how much money they would spend to save each life from COVID. Now this is really important, right? Because I've got something to show you. She's saying, well, we do this, government does this all the time, puts a value to life all the time. So what I said last year was just another example of it's got nothing to do with me thinking that lives weren't, this happens all the time, right? Government agencies do this all the time and they put a value on life. She goes on to say, the article goes on to, it is okay for us to have made that trade-off. As a government, these are the questions we have to make every single day with scarce resources. These are very adult conversations, and I understand they're discomforting to people. So, be really clear. What she's saying is, yes, there are conversations where we have to put a value on life, and I was just saying in that instance, they put a high value on it. The reason I'm calling bullshit on that is 10 days ago, she was asked to put a value on life, and she was offended by the question. If this is just something that happens in government and it's discomforting, it's not comfortable, then why 10 days ago, when this person was asked for it, she took offence?
But the cost isn't the individual road cones, right? So obviously you're still going to need temporary traffic management when you've got a big work site in the middle of a road somewhere. So you're still going to have the lights, or you're still going to have a stop-go sign, that kind of thing. That's where the cost is. It's not on the bit of plastic.
Oh, no, I think you'll find it is as well.
So you don't have evidence at the moment that reducing road cones will save lives. It's a theory at the moment, but you are focused on productivity. NZTA puts the statistical value of a human life at $12.5 million. So how many road cones would have to be removed to justify even one additional death?
Look, Jack, I'm not getting into numbers like that. I think that's a very dangerous game to get into. But what we do know...
Sorry, Minister, isn't that your job?
No, what we do know is that...
That's all you're going to show. Apparently, to Jack Tame, that's a dangerous conversation to get into. But when she makes a public comment about the value of life in COVID, she tries to dig her way out of that by saying, well, government has to do this all the time. I was just saying, no, princess. I'm very, very sorry. You don't get to cover your own ass back then, and then when you get challenged to put a value on life in the work you're doing now, you kind of go, oh, no, we don't do that. You don't have it both ways, so I'm calling bullshit. My honest held beliefs, if she thinks we put too much value on human life during COVID. That's the logical conclusion I draw, Chewie. Sorry, I'm just feeling myself getting a bit...
Are you not calm? Do you need to be calmed?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's almost jarring seeing Jacinda now, because it's been a very long, like, how long have we had this government now? 14 years? Oh, that's much shorter than what it feels like. But, like, we've forgotten, like, I mean, I get it. People want to put it behind them and that sort of thing. But in doing that, we have forgotten all of those lessons. Like, the things that I would hope that people would have retained onto, you know, if you're sick, wear a mask. If you're sick, don't go to work until you're not sick.
Yeah.
Don't try and push through it. You know, and like the workplaces, some are better than others, but some workplaces have just fallen back into the old routine of like, well, you don't want to let your colleagues down. I tell you what, you come to work and you make me sick, you have let me down. I will tough out a short-handed day quite happily instead of being fucking miserable for the next 5. Like, it's again, it's like, where is the value? Like, don't just look at how much sick days cost. Or if you are going to look at them, look at how many are actually used.
Yeah.
You know? It is almost a mental health thing to know that if you go through 5 sick days, which, let's be honest, if you've got a bad flu or someone in your house needs to be looked after, 5 days is a pretty solid whack. But to know that you've got 10 if you really get sick,
Yeah.
and that you can actually recover properly and then come back to work. Like, how many people get sick once a year? From the looks of it, like, people aren't taking the piss out of this. So it looks like these guys are once again looking for a solution for a problem that does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very fair. Right. We've got one more clip with Jacinda, but first of all, Mark just wants us to know that apparently Pat compensates for Chewie's calm tonight. So I don't know what that means, but there you go. All right. This is actually really interesting because it is going back to the COVID conversation, but we talk about, those people who are still stuck in that rabbit hole. There was some information delivered in this podcast that I had never heard, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense, was how many people were dragged into that rabbit hole in New Zealand. Have a listen to the conversation between these guys about how New Zealand was one of the worst places in the world for Russian disinformation. I had never heard this before.
And so one thing that impacted views on the pandemic and COVID everywhere was there was this global deluge of Russian disinformation during COVID, including in New Zealand.
Yes.
This New Yorker story reported that during the final month of the COVID lockdown in Auckland, consumption of Russian disinformation was 30% higher in New Zealand than in the United States.
Yes.
What do you think the impact of that
It's so
disinformation
interesting.
was?
And why New Zealand?
Yeah.
What do you think the impact of that is? How about a camp out in Wellington on the front lawn of Parliament? In fact, I think she does actually mention the Canadian truckers because that's where it sort of all started here.
United States.
Yes.
What do you think the impact of that
So
disinformation
interesting.
was?
And why New Zealand?
Yeah, I have asked that question and I cannot answer it. I don't know why, but I do know that we in New Zealand, interestingly, the claim is that also possibly the Solomon Islands as well were amongst the highest consumers of Russian disinformation at this particular time in early 2022. And the result of that was 6 days after, well, one of the results we see in that time period is 6 days after the convoy in Canada causing the blockade, we had the same in New Zealand. And I think this comes to this wider issue. And this is not to say that government shouldn't take responsibility for whatever contribution may be the role they're playing for any kind of disquiet in their own country. But at the same time, we are interconnected. And back to this issue of the globalization of political culture and the issues, the things that are challenging our, Western liberal democracies, this idea of disinformation, we talk about it almost as if it's just singly this issue of freedom of speech. But when foreign interference is involved, it is much, much more than that. And most countries and most people, I would have thought, would hate the idea of their people being manipulated. And yet that is exactly what is happening.
Yeah.
It does bring more context. Like we said the other day, Chewie, for some people, this is still their biggest thing. Their Facebook post, they listen to reality check radio, the conversations they have with friends. They use Signal because they don't want the government to track them because it all started with microchips being put in the vaccine. Like, these people are still out there. They're still doing it. And when you hear Jacinda explain that, it's like the freedom of speech versus basically getting pulled into a cult. It does both engender an amount more compassion for these people, but also, for me at least, an amount more of fury at all of this, what has happened and what it's cooked. So even if I'm trying to be really generous and I'm saying those people I talked about before who quote unquote chased Jacinda off, and it's not everybody, some of them, most of them, if not all of them, you could probably start their journey to where they ended up screaming at her in a Coromandel store over a Christmas holiday, calling her a horse-faced C-word that ruined your life, with probably Russian disinformation. That was probably the first step one to get to that point. So fury at that panel, but I still there's still empathy in me for the people who fell down there. Oh, but I don't know. Can we drag them out? You can't leave them there forever. I can't be empathetic forever of those people at the bottom. Chewie?
Yeah. No, I really struggle with that. And look, there's people who are going, well, how do you know it was Russian disinformation? All of this sort of stuff. People that look at this sort of stuff look at patterns, basically the times people posts, and you can hide your IP and where you are in the world and that sort of thing. But for people that look at disinformation, like we've had Byron on the show talking about, his book, he was certainly someone that looked at that sort of stuff. And there's a couple of experts in New Zealand that have done big studies and papers and books and have advised the government on where these sources of disinformation come from. And they just pretend to be New Zealanders. And they might have 15, 20 different accounts that they jump between. And one person trying to hide their identity can do an enormous amount of damage. And they know where the chinks in our society are. They know that most countries have a problem with race somewhere. So let's latch on to that. There's always going to be a part of your online society that is unhappy with how society is. So you just tie what you're talking about to that.
Yeah.
And it was dire. And I've often wondered, and I'd love to ask Jacinda, if ever there was a conversation about locking down the internet. Now, I think personally people would go absolutely batshit insane if there was, say, a censorship of the internet at that point. But I mean, what we got as an alternative was people went fucking crazy and are still crazy because of the lines of communication that were opened up because of COVID and people existing online and just not being armed for it. What would you have done, Pat, if they cut off the internet? And they're like, just in New Zealand, think nothing from overseas. Would you have coped?
This theoretical, never going to happen conversation, yeah, of course, I would have coped. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do any podcasting, but, I would have watched a lot of telly. And I would have spent time with the dog at the park.
I'm just talking about the outside access. Like, I mean, maybe they let Netflix through and that's it. I was like, oh, I don't know New Zealand. I don't know what's happened to the internet. We'll look into it after COVID's sorted.
I just wonder, I look back on it now and I sometimes, what do they say about history? History written is written by the winners. I still don't know who won that. Like, I don't know who won. Was it won by the good guys who saved 20,000 lives, or was it won by the bad guys who ended up, being victims of all the dis and misinformation? So in 50 years from now, who's writing the history? Is it going to be a history of this government did really well and this prime minister was treated really poorly because the winners have written the history, or is it going to be a history of Marie Antoinette and let them eat cake and what we had to do to that government? Like, what's it going to be?
I think it's already been written, and I think what we've seen is like, Jacinda's government was thrown out by a very divided country, and we know it wasn't very divided. We know that like 80-90% of people thought that the majority of the COVID response was fine. And then people just naturally got a bit sick of it. And the guys stuck in Auckland, they got the shit end of the stick and they did the hard work for the rest of the country. And there were questions about whether that was the right thing to do at the time. But I think the narrative that Jacinda was a very polarizing person, she was a very polarizing person for a small segment of our population.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's how she'll get reported now. So I think that is history being written, and I don't think that she will ever escape that. And that sucks. That makes me fucking angry.